I'm just going to run through some demonstration files. We'll talk a little bit more about how these things work. Talking to some of you guys at break, really maybe this wasn't explained super clear. The original 64 images that are captured to create the PTM files are totally separate from the PTM file itself. Okay, so those 64 images are in a separate file folder. Once they're captured, they're there. You can make any number of PTM files from them. You can take those PTM files out, put them on another computer entirely, and view them. They're not connected to those 64 images in any way once that file is created, that PTM file is created. So you see actually in this file folder, everything with a .ptm file extension, that's a PTM file. These are completely separated from the original images. In fact, these files down at the bottom, I downloaded off of HP's website. So you can go and get these and get the viewer program and look at them and play with them on your computer yourself. Just go to their website, it takes a few minutes to download them, and you can mess around with them. And I don't even know where the original images for these are. Little bit about file size real quick. You notice these are pretty small files. These are very low resolution images that they were captured with. The finished PTM is a compressed format. So for our application, when we were running about 35 millimeter film equivalency after we did our testing, our cameras were putting out about 5 to 6 megabyte images. So that's times 64. The completed PTM file at that level is about 675 megabytes. You can see up here. So it's a pretty large file at that resolution level. When we stepped one of our cameras actually is 16.7 megapixels. When we stepped it up to its maximum, it's giving us 10 to 13 megabyte image sizes for a finished PTM file size of around 120, 130 megabytes. Big file. That was choking our normal computers. They just wouldn't run. We'll go a little bit over the computers. Basically, you need a lot of memory to make this work smoothly, and you're going to run into storage space issues, possibly. When we're running at this 35 millimeter film equivalency, the 5 to 6 megabyte images, we're able to get all the images, the associated files that you might want to keep with it, and a finished PTM pretty much on a CD-ROM. So we're within 750 megabytes for a complete, set. Once you have those original images, if you wanted to do something like run them through Photoshop to improve the contrast or maybe reverse those images, you can record those functions in Photoshop, apply it, have it saved in a new file folder. Now you're going to get another set of 64 images, and you're going to create another PTM file. So from your original ones, with Photoshop and the auto processing function, you can make an unlimited number of PTMs. Anything you want to do as far as enhancement on your original images, you can do, as long as you do it to all 64 of them equally, which is where Photoshop really comes in handy in being able to automate that. And then you can create a PTM file from that after the fact. So just kind of want to go over that. Let's see. John talked about the seeds. I'll go ahead and pull that one up. This is just a straight PTM file, some seeds. This was, again, captured by Hewlett-Packard. As John talked about, this is the hemisphere of light that was captured. This is a model light space. It has nothing to do at this point with those original images. So all I have to do is just click on the left mouse button, and as I hold it and drag it around, it changes the light position in real time. That's interesting. If I just want a single point, I click it once, and it just changes to wherever you click. There is a brightness level adjustment here. So if it's a little dark, there is some brightness adjustment within the program itself. It's pretty basic. You can also do multiple light positions. So if I select over here as light 1, I can then turn on a second light and select its position over here. I can then turn on a third light and select its position over here. Now it's starting to get a little bit bright, so I might want to turn it down. So you can actually make a single image lighted with multiple light positions pretty simply. Now when you're working with large files, this does become rather slow. It's got to recalculate every time you add a light. So I tend to just work with one. Oop, turned one off. The other thing too is if you want to export these, it's a screen capture function. So it will capture everything that's on your screen, and you can crop out just your image, or you can retain all this information if you want. You're talking about maybe documenting exactly where you were. The only way I can think of at this point is if I were to click here and say that's where my light is, I can screen capture it that way, and the cursor is going to remain in that image. As far as getting exact coordinates, I have to talk to Tom about that. I don't know if that could be pulled out of this or not. So that's the basic function. There's also some other little things. We can hit auto. It'll just give you an auto scrolling, which is kind of neat. And actually, you see that blue cursor floating around. And that it's just like if I were holding onto the mouse and moving it around. But this just does it automatically. You can also zoom. Just a simple go to the plus sign. You can zoom it up. Again, remember, this is a low resolution image. And once it's zoomed, you can do the same thing. You can still move your light around. So I think at this point, you might be able to see some of the texture on the individual seeds. And if you want to pan, it's just a simple left-right. They just pan left-right, up, down. And we can zoom back out. To access some of the enhancement, some of the other features, it's just a simple right-click. It pulls up your menu. This is the specular enhancement that gives it that silvery sheen. It's extracting the surface normals. And then there's diffuse gain. This is something Tom put in just to show the difference between PTM and regular texture mapping. And it just gives you a split screen. If you're looking close, you probably just saw it shift a little bit. Now at this point, the top half is going to be the PTM and the bottom half is a regular texture map image. And I think he mostly just put that in there just to demonstrate the difference. You can also do something called Extrapolating Ptm Space. When I go to this, you notice there's a scale bar pops up. The scale bar is related to that red circle. The red circle now is the boundaries of the original hemisphere of light. So if you think about that dome, the edges of a dome would be sitting on that red line. So you can actually go beyond the original hemisphere to get some extremely low-angled oblique light. The scale, by changing the scale, I just simply change the size of that. So you notice as I come down very low, if I go past it, I can get out into some very low oblique light that might be useful for some very, very shallow surface features. This is actually calculated from the math, and it's not physically possible to go to these locations. If you make it smaller, you can get really down there. So it's kind of interesting. And a lot of these are you can combine them. I turn that off. We'll go to the specular enhancement. This gives it that silvery sheen again. I can also go ahead and turn on the extrapolating Ptm space at the same time and get those same very low oblique angles. You kind of got to play with your individual image to see what's going to give you the best information. And I could zoom up and pan in any of these modes as well. I think we're looking, if you look right in here, you can start to see some of the texture on the seed coatings. The other one is diffuse gain. This you have an amplitude adjustment. On these smaller file sizes, it works pretty quickly. The larger the file size, the slower it's going to work because it actually has to recalculate the values for these images. So you can turn up the effect. And once you get to a certain point, it's not necessarily going to help you anymore, but it's something to evaluate on an individual basis, image by image. And you still have the ability to change your light direction and your position. And again, on this particular one, it starts to pull out some of the seed coat information. You can see it this area and over in here. Starts to pull out some of the texture that's on those seed coats. Turn that off. And if you want to know some information, it's text, DOS-based text format. Basically tells you like plus minus keys for zooming and how to pan, a little bit about outputting a file, the autopilot, stuff like that. So if you forget some of the keystroke commands, the help file is always there. up another one. So that's the seeds. You guys have seen this one. This is another tablet. Same kind of thing. In this particular one, the specular enhancement seems to work very well. So there's no one enhancement feature that's going to work for every impression or every image. You kind of got to play around with it a little bit, and you can figure out, you know, what's going to allow you to see the most detail in a particular image. Now, also with Photoshop works very well with this. If you want to do something like you want to start combining or stacking images, because all of these screenshots are the same, they're the same size, they overlay very nicely, and then you can adjust the transparency. So you can make like a layered single image using multiple Ptm aspects by capturing that screenshot, just placing it into Photoshop, and then you can go and do maybe a diffuse gain or a different oblique light position, something like that, and overlay it, and then adjust the layer transparency and start bringing out details. So you can have it actually create a single image that shows you all the detail that is captured in multiple images. You guys do the footwear stuff. You know, traditionally you're going to get something like maybe one image over here. So now in this area, it's kind of dark, doesn't really show you much, but this is maybe highlighted better. And you get maybe one over here. Okay, well that's got, you know, good information here, but I can't see this very well. So you're really going to start going back and forth visually between multiple images during your comparison to be able to see all the areas of the particular impression that you want to evaluate. If you want to overlay them into a single image or use like a multiple light source function, you can have all of the areas of that impression in a single image that are highlighted very well. So you can just look at a single image to do your comparison. That's one possible way of doing it as well. Or if you like the specular enhancement feature for a particular impression, is giving you good information. But you also want some of the other light source positions, you can do the same thing. You start overlaying, you know, traditionally oblique lighted image with specular enhancement that can give you the best of both worlds in a single image instead of going back and forth between multiple images. And we can run through the diffuse gain, up the amp a little bit. So it's really just kind of play around with it and see what gives you the best view and move your light around. That's kind of fun too. So there's some of that low oblique light, you know. So when I go really down to the bottom, it really starts to help improve some of the stuff at the bottom on this particular one, especially up in this corner. As I move it to the side, it begins to really highlight the detail much better. And I'm actually outside of what you could physically capture with a flashing camera in a traditional sense. Because you wouldn't be able to get the flash physically low enough to get this kind of angle of light. Close that one. This one I always find kind of interesting. It's just a simple piece of wood, cookie, towel, you know, regular terry cloth towel. I'm going to draw your attention to the area on the board of the knot hole, particularly right down here. I don't know if you can, if it's clear, you can maybe just make out a little bit of some chatter marks from the processing, the milling of the lumber. As I come down in our oblique light, it starts to pull it out reasonably well. I come down, you can start to see some of those chatter marks and imperfections in the board fairly well. I move it around. I don't see too many other areas that are really like that. Now when I go to the specular enhancement, you'll all of a sudden notice immediately that those chatter marks are very visible. And now you can also start to see some other areas that I couldn't see originally with the oblique light at all. So this is the kind of thing some of these enhancements can really draw your attention to. Now when we did our initial testing, one of the things we tested was a bloody shoe impression. I didn't think I was going to see a lot of results with it because there's very, very little relief. You know, it's a very, very low relief texture kind of object, but we tried it. And you know, the regular lighting, oblique lighting, really didn't show us much information. I'll pull one of those up later. But when I hit that specular enhancement, it really brought out that low-level relief of the blood on paper. And it drew my eye to defects that I didn't see, you know, originally. And when I turn it off and I look close, oh yeah, it's still there. It is there, but that specular enhancement really highlighted it and made me go, oh, wow, there's something I missed. And it pulled it out for me. When I went back and went, oh yeah, it is there. I just didn't happen to notice it. So that's another big value of just being able to see and observe some of the detail texture that you might have missed previously. What else? The trilobite. This one's always kind of fun. This is good. I'm sure you guys with the footwear background realize you want your light perpendicular to the texture as much as possible. So I come over to this side. See how these horizontal lines within this trilobite are highlighted very well as I come across. But the ones kind of parallel are not as highlighted quite as well. As I move down the other side, now I lose the horizontal lines are not standing out quite as much, but my vertical ones now are much more easily visible. So again, we come back to that, being able to select the perfect light angle to highlight the detail that you want to look at and compare. You're no longer limited to what is captured at the scene. You can basically create any light angle that you want. And go to specular enhancement again. And again, you can move it around. And again, it just highlights the detail in areas much better. And we could try diffuse gain. Increase that a little bit. And it's just another way of visualizing it. Just helps your eye to pick out the detail. Actually, in here you can start to see the actual in the stone, the texture within the stone begins to be more prominent, much more visible. And what is this? Different pebbles. Again, pretty standard. You can kind of start to make out some of the surface defects in this area on the stones and the pebbles. As you go to some of the enhancements, you start to get a better idea of the surface features on some of these pebbles. We can try diffuse gain. Again, the diffuse gain starts to bring out a little more texture. So just playing around with it, finding what's going to work best with the impression that you photographed. These are going to take a little bit to pull up because these are the bigger files, so they're kind of slow to open. I think this is only about a 512 megabyte computer that we're running this on, so it's a little bit slower. The laptops that we've been using will run about 1 gigabyte to 2 gigabytes of memory, and they come up a lot quicker. It just processes faster. I'm going to point out some other things on this once this is up. Come on. There we go. This is that bloody shoe impression I was talking about. One of the things we've been doing is, this is just a regular golf ball marker. It's a little spike on there. And we've been using that because that shows the shadow, what direction the shadows are coming from. While we're working with this, one of the things I'll notice, I'll point out, as I bring this down to a low oblique light, you notice from that pinpoint, I'm actually getting multiple shadows coming off. Well, that's odd. Should have a single light position. Because this is a model light space, when I talked to Mr. Malsbender about this, we happen to hit upon the worst case scenario for this program, which is a small vertical pinpoint source on a uniform background. That is the absolute worst case scenario for this program. And what you're seeing is, we've been calling it a soft shadow effect. That's one drawback that we've seen with this. The shadow transitions are not from a hard black to a white. They're more of a gradient, a gray. It's kind of a soft shadow effect. And what's happening is the polynomial he used, he kept it fairly simple. He didn't write out a full polynomial to map everything because he wanted it to be compressed and fairly small. And that's the reason for these, because the mathematical formula he used is a shortened version. The reason he did that was to keep the file sizes fairly small. When I talked to him, he said, sure, I could develop a more complete polynomial. You'd get the very hard-edged black shadows back. However, your file sizes, we're talking like this one here is about 75 megabytes. So the finished PTM files for a complete polynomial would be running in the 500 megabyte size. So while it is possible, you're really putting a premium on computing power and storage space. Given that we have 64 original traditional photographs that are just like standard photographs, you've got the hard black shadows already captured prior to this, really didn't feel it was necessary to try and go to that extreme to get rid of this effect. It doesn't affect the comparisons at all. In some cases, you might want to go back to the originals if it's really an issue to see, you really need that hard black line. Sometimes they get kind of a little fuzzy, a little soft when you blow them up. But for the most part, it really hasn't affected any comparisons that we've been doing with this. So you can see we move it around. It's a standard, bloody shoe impression. Really don't see a lot of detail. Let me zoom this up. This will take a minute. The other thing on the larger file size, you notice when we zoomed them up, it was much quicker on the smaller ones. That's because it's got to recalculate when I do this zoom. So oblique light doesn't really help. It's essentially two-dimensional at this point. When I go to the specular enhancement, however, you'll notice that there actually is some relief and some texture to it. This detail in the heel area really starts to stand out. Even on the scale, just the small relief on the graduations on the scale begin to start standing out. And if you look in this area, and pay attention to that, when I turn this off, you notice it's still there. It was there originally. It just now all of a sudden it really captures the attention of your eye. Well, wow, there's really something there. So this is one of the impressions actually where when we looked at the traditional photography images and compared them, we were kind of, yeah, there's some detail here. I can see some breaks. I can see some cuts. Kind of an inconclusive, maybe not quite enough to call it, an identification. But when I went to this enhancement, it brought out more defects that I hadn't seen before. And it brought out enough level of detail at this point that I could see that I was saying, oh, well, this is an identification. I could call this an identification at this point. When I go back, I go, oh, yeah, those defects were there. I just didn't see them. So it was really valuable in that case. It took us from a kind of an inconclusive sort of statement to an identification. This was not a real world case. This is obviously, this is something we made in the lab and tested, but there's that potential. I'll go back. So that was one I did not expect to see any real improvement with, but it really did help. You can see actually the stitching pattern really starts to stand out up in the toe area, and it's pixelating out a little bit, but let me turn this down. You start to see the lines in the heel, even the brand name in this area. Some of the lettering starts to stand out with a little bit more detail than you had before. And again, it's there. It just doesn't quite seem to capture your eye. The diffuse gain on this particular one really didn't seem to help much. And again, it's got to recalculate. The larger your file size, the longer it's going to take. There we go. So really, the diffuse gain on this particular example didn't really, help with the visualization at all. Go back. Low. Okay. Another slow one. This particular one is it's of a boot impression in soil, a little more three-dimensional. Oh, that's something I need to mention. You'll notice that window that comes up in the background. This program operates out of a DOS shell. Okay, it is DOS based. When we go to make when you go to work in the lab, when you actually use the Ptm fitter, you're going to have to go into DOS. So you're going to have to. We'll walk you through it. Very simple commands. You just have to type them out. But you have to go back into the day, the old DOS commands a little bit. Right now, I have not tried this on the new Vista operating system. My understanding is they have completely gotten rid of any DOS commanding architecture within that version of Windows. So I don't know if this will work or not, but that's something to be aware of. We've used it fine on 98 through XP so far. So here you just got your boot, normal oblique light. At the scene you might get something like this, Get one over here, one over here. It's not too bad. This seems to really help on this particular impression. All of a sudden you can actually see the holes, the stitch marks start to show up very clearly. I'll zoom in a minute and I'll show you some more level of detail in this particular lug of the sole. Go to the diffuse gain, which takes a while to calculate. This is where it's taking that second derivative function. Come on. Oh, I think I'm choking the computer. Oh, wait, there we go. It's got to run through the calculation for every pixel. When it runs, the PTM fitter runs, what it's doing is it's running that polynomial equation for every pixel of every image. Think about that. That's a lot of calculations. And so the diffuse gain, it kind of helped a little bit, but not too much. Oh, good. Zoom up. You look right here at this particular lug. So I move around. You start to see some, maybe a cut or nick kind of in this area at the edges, maybe some cracks. They're not real clear, especially right down in this area. They're not super clear. Kind of maybe something there, but just really not sure. Now as I move it over, I think you can see that this stands out much clearer. Really dramatic difference. You can see some of the cracks starting to form across the top of this lug on this particular sole. So it brings out that texture much clearer. You could kind of tell there was something there in the traditional oblique light. You really weren't sure of what its exact shape was. Where with this particular enhancement feature, it really clarifies the shape of that defect that's in this impression. In fact, plug this in. And we have, I actually happen to have the sole. I pulled off these images and did some side-by-sides in Photoshop with those enhancement features on that zoomed up area, so you can actually see the defect in the sole that's corresponding to that area once it pulls up. All right. Let me open you that way. Fine. Go this way. Hey, where'd you go? There we go. So this one being, it's a larger view. It's not quite as clear. So yeah, this is a traditionally lighted image. You can see the direction of the light. This wasn't generated from PTM. This is one of the 64 images that were captured. It's just like a regular traditional image. This is the boot sole. You can see there's some cracks down in this lug in this area. And it's zoomed out a little bit, so it's a little harder to see, but you can start to see where those cracks are located in the specular enhancement capture of it. And then I also zoomed in on that. So you can see this is that lug, and you can get an idea of where they're at. Over here you can see the shape of those cracks showing up, which is pretty clear in this specular enhancement image. So over here you might go, there's something there, but I don't know if it's really maybe a soil artifact or it's from the shoe itself. By the time I come to this, I can actually start to see the shape of that crack is really corresponding very well to my shoe sole. Becoming much more convinced, yeah, that is a defect, an individual characteristic is from that shoe sole. And it shows up very clearly. And using the wonders of Photoshop, you can even do something like this, just a split image, if you want to show the difference. So these are all just combined from PTM images. Traditional oblique light in the upper left, the diffuse gain image on the upper right. Straight on normal light coming from the top, and then a specular enhancement image. And you can see the differences that those different enhancements and features can provide. Another split. Also do. In this case, I took 6 images, 6 different directions of light, just put them into a single folder. So you can see the light coming from different directions that goes around. So there's really no end to what you can do with these. One last one. Another big one again, sorry. We were playing around. We wanted to see what kind of shallow relief you might get. So we stomped on a piece of cardboard with a boot. We know you're not going to get any individual detail with it, but we wanted to see if it would pull up something like this. So you've got your standard piece of cardboard. You start to move it around. You can start to see the heel outline, maybe a lug pattern in here. Move up to the toe. You can begin to see more of the pattern. This one I think really benefits from not having a single static image or a set of maybe 4 or 6 static images. As you move it around, it allows your eye to kind of process the information there and give you a better idea of what the shoe sole pattern might be. In this case, the specular enhancement is somewhat useful, but it's not as dramatic a difference. However, we'll let it calculate this. Come on. Need more memory. In this case, actually the diffuse gain I think gave the best information, was most helpful in trying to pick out the pattern. It's not super clear, but it might give you an idea of what type of a shoe sole you're looking at. So it doesn't take a whole lot of depth. Very shallow impressions you can pull information out of with this.
circle that went
Oh,
beyond?
yes, that's I'm going right now. Extrapolating Ptm space. So as I begin to move outside the beyond the border of the hemisphere of light, it works pretty well right at the edge, but you're so dark over here. I don't know. I find it's kind of hard to pull the whole pattern together for me. You know, just the way my brain works. But that low light does start to show the shallow relief pretty well. But the diffuse gain seems to do it over a larger area of the image. It's easier for me to visualize the soul pattern. So it's, I mean, it's going to be up to the individual examiner, what they find most useful for a particular impression. But the tools are all there.
Yeah. Is that done on the PTM, or is that a screen capture and then you
An FFT?
like a Fourier removal pattern?
Oh,
corrugation.
yeah, through Photoshop or some type of that, like remove a background color. You could do that. Okay, I could pick, say I wanted this angle. I can screen capture this. That's what it is. It is now a straight digital photograph. Okay. Some people have been, worried about the resolution of screen captures. We screen captured tire impression images and printed them out 1-to-1, and they were fine. There wasn't any pixelation really that we noticed. Okay. So the resolution on output is pretty good. Now, if you go beyond maybe to 200% or something, you might start to break up. But they've been pretty well. So if you wanted to maybe extract the background and then create a PTM file, you could do that using Photoshop, as long as you did the same background removal process to all 64 of those images. So if you were to record that in Photoshop, what you did to remove the background on one image, and then applied that process to all 64 and save them in a separate folder, you just need to run the fitter program again to create a new PTM file that would have your background removed. So that's another way of going about it. You can do a single screen capture and remove the background from a single image that you've taken off of this PTM program. Or you can remove that background from all 64 and now create a PTM image with the background removed. So it's pretty flexible. It's just kind of up to what you want to do and what's going to work best for what you want to do for that particular comparison. And that's really all the example ones that I've got right now. At this point, you guys have any questions?
Ting, why don't we, before we go into the laboratory instructions, I think we have a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Everybody has a thumb drive on your computers. Plug it in.
Make sure it works.
And let's play. Well, not really. Play. Let's see whether or not we can navigate through a PTM file. There are several example files on there, and we'll just kind of walk around the room and make sure everybody kind of gets a feel of navigating through there. You watch James and I do some of them. Now it's time for you to get your feet wet, or your hands, and see how you do. You'll find it's amazingly easy to get right up in there and get started. So there's a couple of example ones in there. What you're going to do is you're going to open up the...
what I've got on the screen is what you should have on your thumb drives.
Just open that file. You start off with the student files, and then just open up that folder. Just double click on that folder.
These top two are going to be the light position files and stuff for the domes that you're going to be using in the laboratory exercise. So we'll be utilizing these file folders when you make your own PTMs to capture your own images. If you go to the Ptm Viewer folder, there is a test PTM down here that you can open up. Now, did it come up and ask you what program you want to use?
This should launch.
Okay. You're going to have to go, it hasn't been set up on this, so the window should pop up that says which program would you like to use. What you're going to do is hit the browse button, select file from folder. Go browse, Now you're going to want to go to My Computer on the left. And you want to go to Removable Disk E. Double click that to open it. Student Files. Go down to the Ptm Viewer. There should be one file there that says ptmviewer.exe. Highlight it. Now in the bottom left corner, just below the long white line on that setup, make sure that box is checked. Always use this program to open files with this extension. And then hit OK. And now it should be opening up. Once you do this, you check that always use this type of file on a particular computer. Every time it sees that .ptm extension, it's going to go to where that viewer program is. If you move the viewer program, the computer's not going to know where to look for it. So right now what we've done is we've directed it to look for the viewer program on those thumb drives. So this is actually being run off the thumb drives, not the hard drive of the computer. So we'll run that way. It can be a little bit slower off the thumb drive than off the hard drive of a computer, but it's probably easiest. We figured easiest to do it this way. It's all in a single unit. So does everybody have that test file open? Still grinding away.
If you're locked out and not able to boot up, the username is administrator and the password is below his arm. Stand by.
Okay, but Ptm Viewer again.
Oh,
Okay, you're in.
Okay, we need help too.
Okay, hit select program from the list.
Just go ahead, or I need to-
No, it's computing as normal. Oh, you're just, this is a second window like in the background. You just click on here, it just drops into the background. That's that DOS shell that it runs out of, and it just leaves a little window open in the background.
Okay.
So. Oh, there you go. You got it up too. Yeah, the same thing. Yeah, if you have a little DOS window that's sitting on top, go ahead and click on the viewer program behind it. It'll just drop that window back behind it. So where are we? Does everybody have it open? Good? So here with the laptops, you just work your mouse pad. It's hold and left click, and it's going to move the light in real time. If you don't hold the left click mouse button, you just click left, and it's going to select that single light position. If you want your menu, right click anywhere on the screen. It's going to pull up those menu selections. The keyboard controls, if you want to zoom, you need to go the plus sign, so shift to get the plus sign, I believe, on your keyboards. So shift plus will zoom you in. It's maybe a little bit slow. To pan, just use your arrow keys, left, right, up, down. It moves a screen at a time, so you don't have a lot of fine control. If you want to zoom back out, just hit your dash or your minus sign next to the plus sign. Something else I didn't really talk about on the specular enhancement. So I've got it up on the screen. There's some extra boxes that come out. These are just manipulating some of the values that it's calculating. You can play with those and change kind of the exposure setting of your image. So depending on what object you're looking at, you can kind of fine-tune how much of an effect it has. If you want to turn on an additional light position source, like you want 2 light sources moving, your number keys, number 1 is the light that should be on right now. If you hit it, it will turn it off. Your screen will go blank. If you hit number 1 again, it turns that light position back on. When you want a second light source, hit number 2. Now you notice your light down here says light 2. And now you can move that second light position. If you want a third light, hit 3. And now you have a third light come on. To turn those off, again, hit 3 again. 3 will be turned off. Hit 2 again, it'll turn 2 off, and finally go back down to 1. Eventually you get them all off. There we go, and back to 1.
Didn't you say there was a way to have two of your, like, specular enhancement, diffuse gain? Can you do that at the same time? or-
Specular enhancement and diffuse gain don't work well together because the calculations, it really bogs it down. But you can do extrapolating Ptm space and either specular enhancement or diffuse gain. You can also, well, and you've got the movement around. But yeah, the diffuse gain and specular enhancement together really don't play well together. Oh, how big was that? About 8 to 10 inches square, somewhere around there. Yeah, this is actually the gentleman that built our first dome. This was just a clock that he had in his garage that we threw under to make sure everything worked before I took it home.
It's interesting to see that, like the patina on there, like it had blood splatter
Yeah.
on a regular surface like that.
Yeah,
Everybody's in this program now. Piece of cake, huh?
yeah, it works pretty simply. I couldn't write it either. Yeah, I'm not a software designer by any means.
Oh, okay.
Actually, it's the average. You can back it off a little bit.
When I did the diffuse gain,
See
it
that?
brings out a
And then now you can move it.
line above the,
Once you get around there, you can shade it. You see that?
Oh, just
Pretty
above?
cool, huh?
You zoomed out?
in
Yeah,
between.
yeah. That's what it's made to do, is bring out relief.
Clock, like
And
where the clock
so-
arms are gonna go.
Now you can, let's cut this light down a little bit. And now just put it in there.
You're talking
and then
about
hold it down.
along here or along here?
No, along there, it's kind of, yeah, in between that line. It's actually,
Right.
it's right at the top of,
Well, if you had a mouse, you
Oh,
could
yeah.
see
like, the edge of the,
navigate around.
Oh, here.
Uh-huh.
Do it the easy way.
yeah, it's just
Pretty easy,
this right
huh?
here. I noticed I can see it in his.
Oh, yeah, that's
same thing.
interesting. Yeah, it's like
just a weird.
There's like a screen artifact or something, because I'm not getting it on mine.
Way
Yeah, it's
easier
like-
with a mouse.
You don't see it, and then all of a sudden you bring it down. It's
Down and
almost
over.
like a.
Yeah.
Good?
Got it? It's a cake, huh? Yeah.
It was all the work
Here.
it takes to get to this, right?
You're zoomed up.
Yeah.
How long does it take?
Yeah, I'm not getting it on this screen.
About 2 minutes.
That's it?
Because everything's in
Yeah,
the
we're in
auto
diffuse
sequence.
gain and we
Flash
have
one,
it,
flash two.
Yeah, you're not, your
Zoomed in a little
amplitude's
bit.
But like,
You know.
real high. You're coming down into this area, and I'm not getting that on this screen.
Right. Because it isn't all.
Do you see it up
You know
there?
what, when these computers were off, I had noticed a
Bear
line.
trap type thing.
Maybe it's
We have
actually
to
on
set
the
it-
screen
Maybe
itself
it may
because,
be.
and I noticed
There has
it
to
on
be an
his
easier
too,
way
that,
of doing
because
it.
I can
And
see
I
it
like
right now.
In the real
I
time one,
did
remember I
the
showed you
amp
that
real high
fast.
and the line is,
with-
and maybe
if you
it's
put
it's actually
staggered-
the
But
screen
maybe,
itself.
maybe
It's
there's
got
that
it.
area of the
Light.
screen that's
You
showing
can
that.
actually
I'm
just
not
put
getting it
that
on
down
this
and
screen.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll do it all for you right there. And that
That's,
will take about
you bring up an interesting point. Part of this, one of the things we look for is
Very fast. But
generation
even
of
if you had to
artificial
move it
detail or
positions,
false artifacts.
you're only
That's
talking
one of the things I
about
was very pleased about in
minutes.
comparing
How
traditional
long
to
does it
these
take to
PTM
make
images,
flashes?
is while sometimes,
I mean,
you know, that
it's
soft
less than 30
edges, it
seconds.
kind of decreased some of the hard edges and stuff, but we never in any of the comparisons found any false artifacts. So, you know, I was really happy about that. It's not generating false detail, basically. We didn't see that in any of the comparisons that we performed. So,
like the FFT where you can
And that collates.
you can add
into
ridges or
PTM
whatever if you do
file.
it enough times, something like that. That you're not.
I
You're
haven't
saying that
seen
you
it.
never saw anything like
I
that.
never saw anything like that. We always work from the original images. That's one thing about the fitter program itself will only recognize JPEG, TGA, and I think PTM file formats. TGA and PTM are pretty much obsolete
And knowing
at this point.
it's really
So
calculated
it will
off the
only
value
recognize really
of each one
JPEG
of
file
those
extension
positions.
images to
And
create
so
the PTM
once
file
that
from.
occurs, and you take
Okay,
those 60
so all of our
images,
resolution testing and
you
stuff
merge
is
them all
done
together,
using
what
JPEG
it does
file
is
extension
mathematically
capture.
look at all those
Um,
values all the way
Again,
across
using
the
Photoshop, though,
board.
there's nothing to limit
Any
you
place you put
in
the
capturing
lower
your original
row,
images in
the
a different
cursor on
format.
there, it's already-
But
it's
you
got
need
a
to
light
convert them to
every-
JPEG before you create the PTM file.
And so those 64
sense?
images are only used in
I
calculating.
mean, really, we talk about digital photographs.
Now, the extrapolation
If you wanted to go through the
side
work,
of
you could
that,
still use
just
35
think
millimeter
about the
film to capture your
mathematics.
original
You
images.
capture
You just need to
those
convert
up
them
infinitum.
to a
So
JPEG
we've got a
format before you can make a
calculator for this.
PTM.
The calculation for this is fairly easy. You can just kind of mathematically do that. What's the light value based on the distance?
So this PTM file to go into Photoshop, you have to, how do you do that?
The PTM files themselves are kept.
Yeah, when I
We
turn
try to
off
keep
my
them in case we have
light,
board
I can
issues.
see if there's a line on
It's still there.
the screen.
It's gonna be
So
something
we
on the
take a
screen.
copy of
It's gotta
those
be
and
defective
we
in
put
the
them into a
screen.
PTM fitter file. The fitter file identifies the XYZ coordinates of each one of those flashes, or each one of those images. And then those are then collated
It's
into
not letting me go
a
back
single
out though.
PTM
When I try to
file.
unzoom it.
This one you.
Really?
That shift
Photoshop can read a PTM.
Oh, don't hit shift.
No, well,
Oh, don't you-
Photoshop
Yeah,
is
it's
nothing
just
more
as
than a
negative.
display
Yeah.
thing. We put it in Photoshop.
The only reason you need to do
Plus sign.
shift is because the plus is
Kind
on the
of
shift
to-
register for the keyboard. If you had a keyboard that it was just a
to
plus
either
sign key, that was
enhance
it,
or-
that's all you need to hit.
Or
Okay.
bring out something or to display.
Right.
So Photoshop, in the pure sense, I'm not sure is needed. The images themselves are taken.
Yeah, we really, we went for the footwear thing
They're,
because we thought that'd be, the most improvement.
If
and,
the
give
cameras
us
that you
the
have
biggest
allows
improvement
you to
in,
convert them to
our
JPEG.
product.
Then you're fine.
We don't go out
You
to
know,
every
some of them
scene
are raw
that our
formats
agencies
and
have.
that
I mean, we physically couldn't just because we have
Right.
so many agencies. But that's been my biggest
Photoshop
frustration
does that
as
too.
a footwear examiner is really the quality of the
But
images that
for
I
the
get
most
from
part,
agencies.
I mean, Photoshop's nothing more than a display. And
Everybody
kind of,
seems
you
to
can
agree.
use it for single images.
You go, wow, this
And we
might have been
use
really good
Photoshop
if you'd
for
used a
the
flash
final
or
product,
put
kind
a
of
scale or
screen
Yeah,
capture.
that would've been nice.
yeah,
I
that's
love
always
all
useful.
those
And
coming with
you know,
no
unfortunately,
scale.
this is not going to help with the scale
What's that?
thing. They still have to put a scale in the image.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You still,
It's a
you
file
still
extension.
need
It's
to
a
fill the
.ptm
frame
file.
properly.
Right.
You
So
know,
that
the
is to be
standard
included in
photography
Photoshop.
thing
No,
still applies
no.
with
Well,
filling
what you
the
do,
frame
if you're gonna
properly
put that
and getting
into
it perpendicular
Photoshop,
and
you
putting
have
a
to do a
scale
screen
in.
capture.
So they still got to do
The
that.
screen capture
But
button.
at least
is kind of a cut
they're
and
not
paste.
guessing where to put the flash or how
Yeah,
far
all
away
it is
to
is
put
taking
it.
what you see on your
And you're
screen,
capturing
capture
so many
that and then put
images
it into Photoshop.
that, I think
So
it
it's more of a
really gives you
display
the best
kind of a file.
opportunity to capture.
Because this
what
doesn't
you
really have a
express.
print program or
Or doesn't
anything
do
on it.
laboratory
No.
success stuff.
No.
Or
So
that would
switch
really-
towards crime
Which in
folks and
Photoshop,
like
you put
people
everything
like
else
that.
that you
Both.
want, just treat it that way.
Yeah.
I would personally,
And, you know,
I would
and
love
the
to see
value
it
of this thing really
commercialized.
is interactive.
I would love to see
You know,
this
how do you move
commercialized.
around looking at
You know,
different
where maybe
angles
they
and stuff
package
like
a
that.
scene
And you
dome, like
can't
crime
really
scene
capture
dome
that
with
in
a camera
file.
and a computer that goes with
In other
it,
words, in a print or
and get it into the
something
hands of the
else,
local
you know, you
evidence
can't get it
technicians,
in. That's
police
why our
departments, sheriff's
article was
offices,
real
whatever.
tough
So they can take it out,
sort
have
of,
footwear
you know, get people
impression,
to
set it
understand,
up,
because
get
in an interactive
get the camera set up
program, it is
correctly.
very hard to
hit
explain
go
it
and collect all those
in kind
files.
of these
And
printed
you know what? If
images.
they don't want to create the
So,
PTM,
I mean, but
that's
once
fine.
you roll around in it, you can
You know, as
say,
long as
now
they
that's
have,
it.
they can send to
It
us
makes
those
more
64
sense.
images with their light position file, so we know where those were. We can create the PTM separately back at the lab. So really, at a scene, you know, we haven't used this at a scene yet.
Actually,
We just got the paper published, so we're
we
waiting
did
for
the
peer review
validation,
and
ran
kind
through
of
it,
some time.
and
But
we put in a bunch of
you know, my
articles
thought in
or
using this as a
sites in
scene
there
is
for
really to
different
just go ahead and
academics.
collect the images, download them into a folder on the
There's
laptop,
nothing in here
and
to
leave it
really
there.
kind of
Right, and you
QC
don't want them messing
except,
with it anyway.
you know, you
Yeah,
have to
and
make
then we
sure
go to the
that
next
your
impression. So
single
you got a folder
images are
labeled,
all
you know,
kept,
impression
because
1,
it may come
folder
back
labeled impression
to
2.
that.
Just capture
And
all the
then the
images,
single,
leave them in that file
the
folder, and then when I
PTM
get
file
back to
we
the lab the
actually
next day,
store as a
I'll go ahead and
PTM
make my
file.
PTMs
And if we
or
bundle it like
or
we
not.
did
You
on
know, I can
the,
just save those
thumb
images with that
drives, Everything's all together, so if
light
somebody
position
wanted to look
file
at it,
on a disk,
they
and then I
just
could
kinda
create it
go
at the time I
like
want
you
to do
did
the
and load it
exam,
from
or
the,
however it's going to work
program.
out.
Everything
But,
is
the basic
self-contained.
idea is you're always going to have
There's
the
not a whole lot,
64
I mean, if you look
traditional
at this thing, trying
oblique
to,
light images that were
I
originally
guess,
captured.
add
Those are
something,
not going to be changed.
let's say that you wanted to try to add a lot. You couldn't do it in this program.
Right.
You could do it in
You don't really
Photoshop,
do scenes
but
much.
you couldn't do
Mm-hmm.
it in
Pretty
this
much in
program.
the lab all the time.
So there's really
I'm
nothing
thinking
here
maybe
except
this
it's
would be
a
so nice
way of
Yeah.
looking at
at
it.
their end as
Be
compared to,
a way of
stuff that we
assessing
did.
the data that you
Yeah.
would otherwise have,
Yeah.
looked at
Yeah,
a
it's
bunch
too
of
late at that
images
point.
and say,
Yeah.
this
Yeah, and
one
that's
shows
really,
this mark, this one
you've
shows
got
this
to
mark.
always explain it. You've got
You
these
have to write
steps.
that
Your
down
shoe
in
has to have the
manual.
detail on it to begin with. Then that detail has got to be transferred into the
Well,
impression
it's
of
in
the
the
scene.
digital evidence.
And then you have to
protocol.
capture that.
Right.
And if you don't capture it at the scene, casts are great for certain things, but they're not always going to get the same detail that you can in a quality photograph. So really, at that point that they're photographing that, that's your best chance at getting any detail that was transferred.
You tried this on glass?
Um,
Glass,
yeah,
glass windows
well,
and stuff?
not glass. We tried Mylar dust lifting sheet because those are really problematic to get good photographs of. They're so reflective. I thought, well, maybe some of this really oblique light thing that we can do on it. No, it is so reflective. It was horrible. This really did not work on Mylar sheets with dust lifts. It was so reflective that it completely blotted out everything. Even when we went down to the low oblique light, it was just the original photos were so whited out from the reflections off that Mylar sheet that it really didn't help at all. So I'm thinking glass could be the same way.
Yeah, I just had a bunch of cases where I had a bunch of small pieces of glass,
Mhm.
and I would have been really curious to see how it looked on that.
Yeah, I haven't actually tried glass. I'll have to try that when we get back. But
Gel lifters, did you try those?
no, I haven't tried gel lifters. Gel, I mean, that's basically two-dimensional. But I was surprised with the blood too. I didn't think that would work. So
The gel lifters, though.
What it's doing right now is loading the file.
Because
And
now you're
Okay.
dealing with three
depending
dimensions. when you're
on, this
using
this only has 512
oh, okay,
grams.
okay.
or
Yeah,
else.
we use them. I use them to lift stuff at the lab. I hadn't even thought about it because I'm thinking, they're 2D. There's not really much texture there, but. Oh, okay. Okay. I'll give it a shot. Yeah, I'll try it when we get back. These are all things, applications, different things we haven't tried. That's why, we're bringing it out. There's so many different ways to potentially use this. Geez, use your imagination, come up with stuff. Gee, I hadn't thought about jealous. Huh?
What sort of file is it? Image you want to see?
No, all it is a static image. It's kind of like when you do a screen capture, hitting screen capture and putting it into a Word document. All it is a, I don't even think it's
In
a
places where the
image.
shoes had something, where not the places that.
the impression.
All it is a
They
static
didn't grab
image.
glass from that part, so, it's like, they had a big broken window and they submitted 2 little boxes full of glass, but, so I know that there was more glass that they left behind. They must have had glass that was left, there must not be anything on here.
Yeah,
And those were the
I
areas of the
think
shoe that I
it's.
could have actually done something with. I'm like, oh, if I look at this part, it stops like an inch before you get to all the.
And then,
It does.
yeah, what we could do here is, let's minimize.
Oh,
So,
wow.
I knew I was,
Yeah.
in the right ballpark and everything. I had no detail that I had.
Yeah, it's a similar size. And, yeah.
Blood images are there. They see the blood image, they want to photograph it, but it's the ones you can't see right next to it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, those faint ones. Yeah, you start enhancing the ones that you can't see, and man, those are the ones that have the really good
Yeah, it's
stuff.
an attempt to do this, but there's nothing to this.
I did that with the fingerprint case. I'd gone to a scene and
No.
there was blood everywhere, and I hit the countertop with the Mito Black, and you could see these huge swipes. And we initially the guy tried to clean up, which was amazing because there was blood like on 4 different levels.
Oh wow.
And as it turned out, there was one print in the final swipe, and it was the victim's little pinky. So mine was like had meat or something.
Uh-huh.
It was not very good house. And you couldn't, the countertop
Wow.
was clean, and you hit it with the Mito Black, and there were these huge swipes with the pinky at the very end.
Yeah.
Like, it works because, like I said, visually you see
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was kind of neat. I mean, in a weird, way.
Yeah.
Didn't help with the case any, but.
But yeah, but you're like, wow, this
Yeah.
is a whole lot of stuff. Yeah.
I had tons of evidence anyway, it didn't really matter, so.
You should be able to turn off light 1. Off light 2.
Alright, I see the thing.
While that turn 2 on.
I see a tree on its side.
Yeah, I'm really glad he
so we can
had the
do
foresight
a-
to think of forensics, because I'd never heard anything about this. They've been using it apparently in archaeology and paleontology for like 5-6 years. And yeah, and maybe it was the FBI. I can't remember if it was before or after
So
the
then we
FBI
can look
contacted
and
about this
see
embedded
what
writing
type-
thing.
what type of image
But
this
yeah, he
is.
decided, he gave, like I said, a talk at one of our CAC dinner, presentations, and one of our chromalists, saw it. They were there at the dinner, and went, "Hey, that's a pretty neat idea." And yeah, it's just from there.
Because you hit each one, you can see it turn off and on.
Yeah, and it's not just footwear and tire. It's really there's a lot of other things that you might be able to use it
Anything
for.
you have to take a picture of, or,
Yeah.
anything you have to capture.
We, even, we're talking about going to LED lights, and there was one vendor we were kind of working with, and he thought, well, we make LEDs that are multiple
And
wavelengths,
it's no longer readable.
so they can actually build a cluster of LEDs. You could have a white light LED, a UV LED, and an IR LED in a cluster right next to each other.
Wow.
So, I don't know what application it
They
might
have an
have with this,
export
because we're really looking at
image,
shadow
but it's not
detail.
as good.
But
It's
you
just
could
a
probably
small
set this
screen.
up to use
Green
IR
screen.
light or UV light.
Just be worried and in court.
I don't. Yeah, I don't know that it would help. With being able to change the angle of IR light. I don't really
I
know
see
there's
what you're
shadow
saying,
with
yeah.
that, but
And that's
it's another
possible
possibility.
through,
You could do it.
Photoshop.
It's something else to look into. I don't know.
Pretty-
There's a lot of different things you could possibly do with it.
Imagination and some time.
Yeah.
Once you get into digital.
These screen prints are what? Bitmaps
Oh,
or JPEGs?
I don't know if they're JPEG
Yeah.
or not. I just do a control print screen and that save it to the
What
clipboard.
format are they?
They're clipboard format. I don't know if they're bitmaps
it's
or
just
what.
it's a clipboard.
Yeah,
image.
it's just a clipboard, and then if
Okay,
you open
so
up
that doesn't really
Photoshop, you
have
can just
any-
paste
that's
that onto a
just-
blank. You open up
Right.
new file,
So
and just paste it onto
it's
a
like
blank
any
image,
kind of a screen
and then
capture
boom, your screen
of
goes up.
anything
It's
that's
basically
on
just a
here.
screen
It's
capture.
just
I don't know
a-
what the file extension would be on it. I really don't.
Thinking if you wanted to do more
Yeah.
analysis
This is
to
probably
this,
an
then you would
example
have
there.
to track it.
The audience that'll ultimately get these things by webcast and uploadable
Right, but you'll
files,
always have the
they wanna get
originals
some of
also.
these details that don't have the luxury
Original
of having to be able to
64s, and then
play
once
with
you go to
Yeah.
Zoom,
Maybe
you
wanna
can capture
summarize
those
something that you
things
all just
and
got out of
put them into
the
Photoshop as
video.
just straight images and kind of use a mosaic content
Okay.
to describe.
Okay.
That kind of defeats the whole purpose.
We did this, here's how to
Yeah, it
capture
does.
this.
And the problem with explaining this
Okay.
is
Either now before you do your next portion.
it's an interactive,
At the end of today.
so trying to explain this in two-dimensional format is
Good, we're
very
into it, yeah.
tough.
3 hours.
If you brought this into court and did this in front of a jury, the jury would say, wow, look at that.
Okay.
But if you took images from this to court,
So
it's no different than a
once
flat.
you and John decide how you want to do that, I'll have you two lay that down on tape now. It
Okay.
may put us a little later
I
with the
think-
lunch, but that's okay, we'll come back later.
Lab, don't you think, for
Okay.
ASCII, that you would have to somehow be able to save this one? Say, I can see that individual characteristic here
Mhm.
with that lighting. Now I
Yeah.
want to save that.
Right,
And
and the only way of doing that is put it in Photoshop or
How do I get
in
that
a
off
Word
again?
document.
Do I just
And then,
left click
you know,
again?
you
Like
can,
this, where I just
in either
like-
program
wherever you
allows you
left
to
click, that's
circle
where
or
your light is.
highlight things
But if I want to
and
go
then
back
write
to this
them
where I can
down.
just scroll it around.
But you're always
do I
gonna
Left
have
click
this
and hold it.
left click
anyways.
again?
And hold
So,
it.
you know,
And hold it.
the
Every time
ability
you
to go
click,
back to
it's
it
picking a new
is
light
fairly easy.
position. So
I
basically,
don't
it's a
think that,
continuous
you
click,
know,
if
ASCII
you
or
will.
anyone
So it's
else
just
would have a
dragging that
problem
light
with
Dragging it
that.
around.
It's no different than taking a digital image and then zooming onto a particular part of the digital image. And even if you kept that image, you know, you're storing it on a Word document or in Photoshop or something else. But you're showing
Yeah,
where you
well,
want
yeah,
to really
I do
look at
firearms
it, like
comparison too.
in Joseph's.
problem
here,
with
you know,
that
if you
one
blew this up, and
is
then you
I'm
were
not sure
circling
how you
that.
could get
do it
them
even in a Word
side by
document,
side, because this is kind of in a
capture that.
sense, the
And even
light
if you
position
kept
is not
that,
static.
You
Right.
can
the
always
image
get back
itself
to that
is.
by putting all
Really
the
under the
settings
bullet
in your Word
scope,
document.
you
or
want to be able to
Photoshop.
scroll across that dividing line, move the dividing line
Right.
around, you know, and see everything as it corresponds
Well,
and moving that across. And that's really not something you can capture with this because they're really static images.
I don't
What
see
you
it
would
where you're
get
gonna have a
is
problem. I mean,
you get
it's used
one
across different
static
professions.
image with a dividing line, you know, whatever's
And the
coming through
mathematics
that
behind it has been here for
Trinoc
eons,
head.
you know, that-
You'd have to
I
have
mean,
two domes,
the
one on each
algebraic
side.
equations,
The lights would have to be sequenced identically
you learned them in
to
high
go
school or
around, and then you'd have
college.
one image of whatever position those cartridge
Don't
cases
worry
were
about
in.
it.
Right.
And then you
We're-
move it
We'll
around.
stand way behind.
And
you.
I don't know how much it would really help on that with a comparison.
That's just what Lance
Add a
wants to
line.
hear.
Wait,
Don't worry
but-
about it.
You know, they're doing this live
Across
video
the country.
capture system that it sounds like you might be coming up with. Then you might be able to capture it as you're moving it around.
Remember, you can vary the
So-
light
I saw something in
to
San
get
Diego
more or
where they
less
had
on
a
this.
cartridge or whatever, and they had it on a stand.
Yes,
Yeah, it was
once you
kind of
get the
video.
hang of it, it
They
is
were able
very
to turn it
easy to
360 so you
navigate.
could really
but
without
until you
touching
get
the
in
evidence.
there and be able to do some of
Okay.
these,
That just reminded me of
It's
this
not
a little
so
bit.
easy.
You know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
similar,
it's like
obviously
a
not the same.
Yeah.
like the video game. I
Oh.
can't even
Randomly,
get used to those, you know, the
all
plus
the
and
different angles
minus.
of light.
Yeah.
But you're right,
Computer
you'd
game,
have to
my
have
kids-
it.
It-
I
yeah,
don't do
it's
firearms,
hard
I was
to-
just thinking about
have
that.
Yeah, you know, when the intern did that, I went, oh, that's pretty cool, and see if it works.
You wanted to put more.
When I thought about it, I'm
color
like,
in
you know, I
your
don't know how,
picture,
from a
right?
practical standpoint, it would really work out
Otherwise,
very well.
Really?
It does
How do
pull
I
out
darken
like a
this?
firing pin impression. Sometimes we have a little trouble
This light?
highlighting that
Move the
with the,
light
you know, with our
bar.
lights
Oh,
and
you're
stuff.
on light too.
And it really does pull the
Yeah,
stuff in the
okay.
firing pin impression out quite well. So that was pretty nice.
Okay, so.
But again, I don't know how
Let's
to
go to-
capture that. You know, you could maybe do a split screen and then capture it and pull it out or something. It'd be like a
Usually.
documentation photo sort of thing. But
Usually.
Looks like it's a register that.
yeah, I don't know.
You could go up to
Maybe
four, but it'll
maybe you
probably
can come up
back
with
to
something.
one.
Well, it does.
Oh, but even smaller applications like lifting fingerprints off of cartridge cases, photographing those.
Yeah.
That's always.
This is perfect for that.
You might have some issue, you know, with the curved surface.
Right.
You're going to get, you know, focal plane
Little
kind of things,
distortion.
but
Usually-
yeah,
And all photos of
Just hit the light.
All you have to do, you know,
toggles
really just make
on
a
and
dome.
off.
yeah, the right
You
size
can see
and
the
stuff.
intensity go on and off. And you can see the slider change, but it
But you
always
know,
stays
that's
with
it's
the-
pretty non-invasive.
the highest
It doesn't
number that
destroy
you
anything. Just light, so you can always take a shot.
I think it's display normal visualization.
I'm curious to hear about what kind of cameras you're suggesting.
Yeah, I'm going to go over how we selected them.
Typically,
Gotta be on
yeah,
her.
this.
We try to
this
keep
is-
it pretty
You had
simple.
two sliders.
You know,
One
I
and
didn't
two.
do like
Right.
you know full-blown
Why this
professional
one only has-
development, you know, resolution thing. I kept it pretty simple. I wanted to answer a simple question. So
Copyright version of the software is
yeah, there's.
2000.
I'll give you the stuff. It's a $17 resolution poster you can buy. I mean, it's pretty inexpensive.
You know, there's.
We tried
for
to
the
minimize the
program
lens effects
itself, there's really not
just by
that
selecting,
much
you know, center target.
that
stuff.
has
I'll go over what we
changed
did.
in it. We're doing these like three. One should
You have
come
no
right
idea.
Your
now.
number is a composite of several numbers.
Yeah. What it's supposed to do is, once you hit the same number twice, it's supposed to shut
Wow.
off, right?
The first time you hit it, it turns it on. And then if you have like 3 on, when you hit number 2, say you have 1 through 3 on, if you hit number 2, it then selects number 2. If you hit it again, it turns 2 off. And then you hit 3, it's going to go back to 3. You hit it again, it's going to turn it off. When you look down at the light bar, at the bottom it says light 1, 2, and 3. Whatever light you're on.
They're
it'll say, like-
overlaying on each other on this one.
Oh, really?
It's got 1, 2, 3
Overlaid on top of each other?
compressed.
When you turn it off, if you look up the screen, see where this bar is in the middle? When you turn that light off, it's going to go all the way to the left.
Now press 2, light 2.
So now mine just changed to light 2, the bar's in the middle. If I hit 2, if I go back to 1, now I went to light 1, the bar's in the middle. When I hit 2, it goes back to 2, but that light is still on. If I hit 2 again, now that I'm on light 2, you notice it went all the way to the left. I just turned light 2 off. Now when I hit light 1, I went back to light 1, and it's on. If I hit light 1 again, it's going to turn light 1 off, and there's no image because there's no light.
This is light 1, right? Light 2's on, 2's off. It's on.
Are you working off of a laptop too?
No, this is a desktop.
Okay.
Yeah.
The laptops seem to work a little different.
Really? Yeah, we run the laptops off the, that's what actually drives the domes, or laptops.
So that's on light 3. It's on. Light 3 should be off, but it still says light 3.
Yeah, go to 2. Hit 2. Is 2 on or off?
2's off.
Now go to 1.
I hit 2, but it still says light 3.
Really?
And
Oh, no, you have a composite of 1, 2, and 3. Really, on the display.
maybe it's just my impatience or not
Maybe.
enough
I think
RAM.
it's a glitch.
You
That's what it
impatient?
is.
No.
So, if all else fails,
Close it and reopen it.
just refresh
You
it.
go across the top and then these are
Where's the refresh button?
Well, you just go back in and, oh, this is light 3.
But once I got it on, I can do it.
That's light 3 on,
Yeah.
light 3 off, light 2 on, light 2 off. Yeah. Refresh. Oh, you know why? Because it's taking a long time to refresh the screen. Because these probably only have 512K of RAM.
Okay.
Oh,
They're very slow.
That's why these are working different than that.
okay.
Yeah, they're very slow.
This is that test image, the clock. It's about a 17 megabyte file. So it's not as big as the ones, the shoe print ones that I showed you earlier, but it's still pretty good size. That's something else. Really, the settings. When I talk about the resolution of the cameras, you know, that final file size of each of your images is, you know, something you need to think about when you're making your system. The lower the camera, you can set your camera lower, take smaller images, and it's going to produce smaller PTMs.
So these were 16 megapixel images originally?
This particular one, no. This was a test file. We just wanted to make sure the dome worked. So we set it at a pretty low resolution. So the PTM that you're working with is about 17 megabytes.
Once you've loaded the
finished.
program and you said open with that.
And what was the working distance of the
Open with
camera?
that.
This is actually
So once
taken
it's
with
set,
the dome that you'll be working with today.
You're fine.
The white
And what we
in
tried to
lab
do
dome
is to bundle
collected with
everything
that
on
one.
the
So
phone
we're
drive. So once you get back to
22
your lab, you
inches
put the PTM Viewer
radius,
on your
somewhere around
desktop or something. Just put it in one of your programs. It'll automatically. But for the convenience of this and getting everything on, that would make it easy for everybody. So, but you had to do that stupid setting, finding the program. And then there's 2 laptops in the lab, you know, each one connected to each one of the PTM instruments. So you'll be just taking your thumb drive, putting it in there to capture all your images. So,
Yeah, part of this might be because we're running off the thumb drives too.
that's true.
You're actually running the program from the thumb drive right now. It's not being run on the hard drive of that laptop. So if you were to drag these things from your thumb drive to the laptop, it'd probably improve the speed a little bit.
But it's easier to put in your pocket.
Yeah.
Okay. So is everybody comfortable with this particular part?
Yeah.
It has to kind of try and summarize.
John, you may want to
Some of the stuff.
take a couple minutes and summarize the things that you discovered. He ends up movies using this for the first time. And the audience that's going to see it on the pod webcast won't have the luxury that they did of playing with it on the webcast. So you may want to just take a couple minutes and go through what did the audience experience and what are your, you didn't do the pun before, what are their first impressions?
What are your thoughts?
So
on
what are
feelings?
your first impressions? How's that? Anybody have any comments as to navigating through this? Easy, hard? you know,
Not
the
difficult
way
at
we
all.
looked at it, we got up and running within a couple of minutes, and it was fairly easy. It just takes some time learning all the function, because there's a lot. There's quite a few different variations you can do on this thing. So, you know, to learn it all, it may take some time of playing around with it, but in order to just navigate and get started, you know, I know some people had problems just trying to load it, but that was because we put everything on the thumb drive. If we would have had the Ptm Viewer on the laptops, as soon as you clicked on that test one, it would have just populated. So that was my fault. I thought it would be all easier just to put it on the thumb drives, because that way you guys can take everything home with you and have everything self-contained. But I forgot about loading it onto your laptops too. Any first impressions? Hard, easy?
Easy.
It was easy to do, yeah.
Pretty easy to work
Like I
with.
say, a few minutes you're into it.
Yeah.
You can find your way around.
Yeah, get the
No.
basics down.
Now, some of you had, you know, concerns about maybe some of the great ASCII rules, or, you know, even some of the laboratory rules on capturing data, storing data, and storing what you have as an image. You know, the screen capture is nothing more than any other screen capture, and it could be put into a Word document or anything else. And as you know, if you have a concern about that, just store it as a Word document or something and put all the settings that you had on there. Well, most of the settings will be captured for you. Anything else you want to put in there, like the zoom or something else, and just put those on there too.
Yeah.
And that's a good way of documenting it. Those can all be bundled into the CDs that you have with all your original files and the PTM file and everything. I mean, you can actually put all those together and just make different folders on the CD to capture all that data and documentation. Because the documentation, I know, is the key in following the trail. You know, and as long as you document it in your notes and have a copy of that stuff, I don't really see too much of a problem with it. Now, trying to explain this to a jury isn't all that easy, nor is it easy trying to explain it to you people. But, you know, and the power really isn't in the two-dimensional image here in court. I mean, really, I don't know whether or not it's possible. I'm sure that there are DAs that really want to see you do this in court. You know, with the Elmo screens and everything else these days, you know, the power of this particular product is the interactive nature of it. The ability to look at different angles, different modes, and everything else. And that may be really where the power is in showing just a jury, too. I mean, in looking at all this stuff, you're trying to explain in a flat file what a computer program does, and it's very difficult to do that. You know, I mean, when we first started today, you guys were probably saying, "Oh, what is that?" It's very difficult. Even when you're doing the screen capture or something you see might be valuable in your comparisons or something, it is very difficult to understand how you got to that from the starting point. And so it may be that the interactive files are something that you may have to present to the jury. And we'll lay James out to go testify if you need
Yeah,
some
I got to be the
background
guinea pig.
information. Yes.
Some of the APIS systems have a form of 3D mapping or 3D representation in them that you can do, that you can use. But this is so much more sophisticated than those, and so much simpler to use, so much more precise in the lighting that you can give to an object. I'm interested in seeing how this would really work on patent impressions of fingerprints from crime scenes, because those are many times the most difficult, especially in that dry Las Vegas air where everything evaporates in about 45 minutes.
Well, I can tell you, you looked at the bloody shoe print, and the bloody shoe print, you know, you can see that it would, and it doesn't necessarily bring out something more than that was there, but it tunes your eye into certain characteristics that you thought you saw them there, but you know, it's kind of like, okay, well, I see a smudge here or something.
This November, I've got to go to court on not only some shoe impressions on a tile floor that we were able to make to a specific shoe, but next to the head of the victim in a carpet is a partial impression that corresponds very nicely. But all I've got to work with is 2 or 3 ugly photographs and a cast, which a crime scene investigator actually did of the carpet. And you can tell that it's a lug-sole boot. And you can see the side lugs, and you can see those crosses and their positions. There's not a lot of detail, but to have something like this, where I'd be able to specifically adjust that lighting on an infinite variety, would be so much more valuable than what I've got to work with.
And you may see some of that. We have a cast in there, plaster cast that we made. And it may be possible just to take that cast and put it under a PTM dome and create your own image and see whether or not you can see more detail than you did before. That might be interesting. Now you're from where? Nevada?
Nevada.
Oh, it's hot there.
Yeah. It's a little warm, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a drive.
But yeah, you know, I've done some work for Henderson before. I had a murder scene that I helped. I did all the trace and the blood for him. I don't know why, but I did. And so, well, yeah. I mean, I came all the way from Central California to do it. But yeah, so we can talk later, and you know, if you want to bring the cast down, I mean, our lab is only a couple hours away. So you know, we'd be glad to let you plop it under there, capture the images, put them on CED, and we can help you with it, and maybe you'll be able to say more.
Okay. One of the things is, you know, if the detail is not present in the impression, this isn't going to help you see it. It still needs to be there. I just think this system is going to give you the best opportunity to see what is there. So
I took the cast, put it on a copy stand, and played around with my forensic lights and some other things, and it was just really, really hard. But to hold it in your hand and look at it, you can see the lugs. And I've got 2 lug-sole boots, and I can tell you which one of the 2 it corresponds to more closely because of the spacing of the lugs and the features, the shapes of those crosses in it. There's no question in my mind.
And that's where some of the enhancements come in too. They may be able to bring out something more in those things, because what you're doing right now with the copy stand is looking at just single kind of images from different sides. Imagine being able to take the second derivative or kind of a negative image of it and being able to see some of those things. It just kind of brings out more. You know, it doesn't always in every case, as you saw, but in some cases it really helps. And it just, more than anything, it tunes your eye into particular things, and it allows you to see them a little more clearer than you normally would have if you just kind of looked at it and said, okay. You know, and then we've all done that and kind of blown it off. But now it gives you the ability to even see more detail than, you know, or your mind's eye is tuned to better detail on some of these things.
Yeah, the bottom line was really, you know, we compared it to traditional footwear impression photography. We actually selected 4 images out of the 64 original and printed them. And then we mimicked those positions using this PTM program, printed those, and compared them. And then we went and looked at the traditional to the using all the specular enhancement and everything on the screen. And really the bottom line was it didn't always improve the bottom line conclusion of a comparison. You know, the PTM did not always do better than the traditional photography, but it never did worse. And in some of the cases, it did do much better. So it's really, you know, it's a situation where I don't think you can go wrong with using it, because it's going to give you that best shot at coming up with a conclusive result. You know, whether it be an elimination, identification, whatever. You know, I like to have an answer instead of being, well, I don't know. And I think this is really going to maximize your opportunity to be able to do that. If it's just not there, it's not there. We didn't find any false artifacts created in any of these images. It didn't create detail that wasn't there in the first place. So, you know, it's not going to do worse.
My boss has a nice little old lady that lives right across the street. Her name is Mrs. Weicker, and she's got a son named Anthony. He's always kind of looking for neat little things like that. to put into his show. He's been out to the lab a couple of times.
So, you know, if nothing else, it helps. But even in the comparison of traditional photos versus the PTM files that we have, we really took it. We took the best situation in traditional photos because remember we mapped exactly. We used the dome and we just used certain images from 4 sides of it, so we controlled the environment very well. Imagine if you were out there standing and having to hold the strobe to one side. It's a lot more variable than if you had a copy stand with 4 that are exactly placed exactly the same distance from the center of your image. So we took the best case scenario even from the single images to compare it to the PTM. In reality, in real life, there is a lot more variability in how far you hold it, at what angle you hold it, and all those things. So it's a little more. The comparison should be a little better with the PTM because of being able to map around an entire sphere. So any other impressions of this program so far? Yes.
I was just going to point out what James has said is that I think it's really important to focus on the fact that with this PTM, you're not seeing any artifacts where we had discussed, like, when you start with image enhancement systems and you do like the FFT, and all of a sudden for fingerprints you've added in ridges that aren't there originally. It's nice to know that with this system, you're not seeing any indication of that.
Right. Yeah, there is no artifacts. It is what it is, and I mean, if you look at just the straight mathematics of it, all it's doing is calculating each luminescence or light value across the whole hemisphere. That's all it's doing. Yeah. It's not doing anything else. The mathematics of the second derivative, looking at the diffuse gain and the specular enhancement, those are all things that traditionally been used in a lot of different applications, and we're not introducing something new to the entire program. So absolutely, if you take nothing else, be assured and then, confirm for yourself that you are not creating any artifacts based on this. The only artifacts you may create is if you got a scratch in your lens. And it'll be there anyways.
Or on your computer screen.
Yeah, or on your computer screen.
Here's my computer screen that is showing up.
Oh.
That when you turn the light off, you can still see it on the screen.
Yeah,
we were trying to figure it out.
Yeah, really, the math, the polynomial equations are run based on that the values are created from those static images. So you're not adding anything. I mean, it's actually it's a reduced representation because it's a compressed file. But that information is coming from a traditional photograph of an impression. So you can't add anything back in. It's actually taking a little bit of information away because it's compressing. It's not that complete polynomial. So you're starting with that base level of a real photo, and that's where this is coming from. So.
Now the mathematics behind extrapolating outside of it are pretty much the same as all the other math also. All it is vector analysis. From vector analysis you have 2 points in an array and it goes out to infinitum. So by knowing where it is, and you can calculate all the values to the end point or your center, that means you can calculate it out to infinitum too. So I mean, it's an infinite series mathematics. It's fairly straightforward. Well, it's not really that straightforward, but it's, I mean, it is something that has been around since the 1800s. It's not something new, and it's a direct application of mathematics to this thing, and what it allows you to do it is those things in front of you now. The computers, I mean, and those things, the first ones, like when I was in college, the burrows were about the size of this room, and you use cards. I mean, look at what you got on your thumb drives now. The thumb drives hold a tremendous amount of power. And the speed of the RAM and the processors now with the dual processors, much faster. And that's what allows you to do all this stuff. I remember the first mass specs were back in the early 40s. I mean, they were about the size of this room. And then as Carl said, I collaborated with, at that time, Hewlett-Packard and the inventor of the smaller GCMS. He drove it on a napkin, a cocktail napkin at lunch, and reduced the size. What allowed him to do that was computers. The ability of the computers to control all those things and to be able to use circuit boards instead of those tubes. Reduce that size considerably. New vacuum pumps, everything allowed, the technology allowed you to go from the size of this room down to, you know, a quarter of a table now. And it's all in that. It's amazing. Although I must be old, but I mean, that is the power of all of this. And as laptops go, you know, I looked at one of the newest virtual image computers, and that is, it looks like a pen. Looks like that, you know, and then you pop it open, it's a stand, and it throws out a 3D image, and then you have your flat keyboard, and you type. It projects out. That's the power of a computer. That's where we're going. And so you can see the power of all that and the ability to do these programs that we never would have thought. Who would have thought we went from 4x5 format to 35 millimeter and now digital? I mean, we're just cruising along in an information age.
That was it for the demo stuff. Do we want to go ahead and go through,
we can go through
the lab exercises or break for lunch and do it right before?
Let's break for lunch, otherwise they'll forget it before the exercise.
Try to go over it right before we head over there.
So after lunch, I think what we'll do is we'll come back here, we'll talk about the laboratory exercise, and then we'll go to the lab room and we'll get you started on doing Ptm files. So if you have things that even writing or something else, bring them, you know, or if you can think of something during lunch or spill ketchup on a piece of paper or whatever. You know, look at those things and you can create Ptm files from them. Okay, let's break for lunch. I hear they have a great lunch. So.
Yeah, I close mine
This
down.
KS, is that Moguro?
We're just going to real quick go over student directions for the exercises that we're going to be doing. You guys should have this file on your thumb drive. It's just called Student Directions. Very original title. Basically what we're going to be doing is we've got two domes. One of them is the portable dome that we can take out to scenes. The other one's the in-lab model. You've got these thumb drives, and we want you to go ahead and capture your images onto those thumb drives. You should have enough room on one of them for one complete data set, so kind of pick what dome you want to try, and we'll go through it. This is kind of the instructions or details for how to make it. One of the things we did find in using this with the way our software is set up to automate this, the camera settings are kind of important. You need to make sure the camera's on one-shot shutter mode. If it's on multiple shots, it can kind of freak out. I've been using manual exposure settings, not auto settings. The camera on the sync cord, a lot of times it doesn't realize that it's connected to a flash on the controller boxes that were built for us. So I just leave it on manual exposure settings. I just set it manually for a 60th of a second because I know I'm running a shutter flash, and I select the aperture. I usually set it for around f11 to f16, just something depending on the object I'm photographing to give me enough depth of field for a good image. When I leave it on auto settings, sometimes what it wants to do is it wants to throw a focus light or something like that, especially on autofocus. It'll try and focus in between images, and it really messes up the timing between the firing of the flash and the firing of the camera. They don't talk well because the camera's busy trying to do something, and it freaks it out. And not knowing that a flash is attached to it, if you're in a completely dark room, it doesn't know a flash is attached, and it's going to go, oh, I need 30 seconds worth of exposure. And so now it's going to hold the shutter open for 30 seconds, and the controller box is trying to tell it to take another picture because it's time to take another picture, and the camera's busy going, no, I'm not done with this one, and it freezes up the software. So I found the easiest solution is I just set it on manual. We just run a 60th of a second, you know, a good f-stop to give you the depth of field you want. Set the lens to manual focus, and that prevents any software complications. Of course, you've got to compose your image through the viewfinder, just like standard photography. You need to fill the frame with the object that you're photographing. You make sure you're in sharp focus before you take the folder images. On your thumb drive, you are going to have these two folders, DOM1 blank PTM files and DOM2 blank PTM files. The DOM1 is the big white one that's for the lab. DOM2 is the black portable one. Whichever one you select, if you're going to take your PTM files on DOM1, you want to use the DOM1 blank files. If you're going to do it on the portable DOM2, you want to select DOM2 blank PTM files. The reason for that is because each of these has their own light position file. The flashes are not in the same physical locations for the two domes. They don't cross. So when you make your PTM file, you have to make sure you're using the right light position file for that dome, because the program needs to know where those flashes are. It'll create a PTM file. It just won't look right. The lights will go in the wrong direction, something like that. So when you go in there, what I'm going to have you do, when you open up that folder, let me open that up again, take DOM1. You got something called blank LP text. It's just a text file. That's our light position file. It's blank because it hasn't had the image numbers inserted into it. I'll show it to you. These are going to be, if we started at picture 1, it's just going to be image 1, image 2, image 3, image 4, image 5. What these are, and when we go through constructing your own dome, I'll explain this in a little greater detail. This is basically a normalized vector value for the x, y, and z coordinates of the flashes. It's a very simple format. You can have the image numbers there already, but then you're going to have to rename your images to match those numbers. So your image file in the light position, or your image name in the light position file has got to match what your actual image number is. So if image 1 was taken with flash 1, this has to be image 1, and this is the flash 1 location. Okay, they have to be in the correct order. So I'll go into this a little more when you're building your own dome. You need fixed, repeatable flash positions to be able to do this. It doesn't really matter what the order is. You could bounce around if you wanted to, but it always has to be in the same sequence, because it has to know that picture 1 equates to flash 1, and picture 55 equates to flash 55, and where those positions are, okay? So these other files, they're just some little batch files that make it easier to create the PTMs. So we've got the directions here. You've got those folders on your flash drive. Use folder 1, for example. Just pick whichever one you're using, DOM 1 or DOM 2. So you're going to go ahead and open that, and you want to go to one of these little bat files. It's the GoBat. Right-click on it, go to Edit. Now you see right up here, there's these two lines that say File Name. Okay? This is where you can name your PTM file. You can leave it File Name, and it'll come back out File Name. But if you want to call it, I don't know, call it quarter. You need to change both of them. The I is input, the O is output. So it's going to output a PTM file with the name of quarter. So it'll be quarter.ptm. Okay? So once you do that, this is kind of a DOS sort of thing. It won't automatically save. You actually have to tell it file save. So you're going to save it that way, and then just close it. Oh, it will ask me if I want to save it. No, I don't. So once you've got that, oh yeah, remember this is kind of a DOS environment, so no spaces, no periods, no slashes in your names. It's kind of tricky that way. That's the old DOS thing. Then we're going to go into the PTM Dome control software, and that's going to be open and running. You know, we'll be right there to walk you through it. But basically, you go in, and after you connect the software to the camera, you select what folder you want to put your images in. There's a browse button, so just like any other file operation, you're going to click browse, click on your thumb drive folder, and then open up the folder that you got all these blank files in that you're going to use. So your DOM 1 or your DOM 2 blank files, whichever one you're using. Select that folder, and that's where it's going to download the pictures that you take. It's going to drop them right into that file folder. Okay? Then we're going to select 64 pictures, initialize the strobes, tell it to take picture, and then you're going to sit back and wait. On the lab model, it takes 2 to 3 minutes to collect all 64 images. On the portable one, there's a little bit of manual intervention involved. We have one fixed arc with 8 flashes. That software is a little different in that it fires 8 times. Then you have to pull a small pin and move it to the second position and repin it. It'll pause, and then tell it OK. It's going to take 8 more. It'll pause, pull the pin, move it to position 3, hit OK. It'll go. Take 8 more. You're going to move it till you go to all 8 positions. Now the positions are marked on the dome. You have to start at 1 and finish at 8 because again it has to be in that sequence. If you went backwards, it's going to think the flash is in the wrong place when you go to make that PTM file. So you always have to start at position 1, and the flashes are sequenced to fire in a specific order from the controller box. So just as far as moving the arc, it's just you pull a pin, move it to the next one, put it in, wait, do it. You just do that 8 times. It's fairly quick. Once you have all your images captured, that's really all you need to do with the domes. At that point, you could come back here to process the data. We only have the 2 laptops in there that are running the domes. We can go through there. And then that's where you're going to create your PTM file. And that's where you're going to have to go into DOS. Okay? And what you're going to do, there's a little run command window down there. This isn't in there. When you pull up that, you're going to type in CMD, that's command, and that's going to open up a little DOS window for you. Well, first thing you need to do is change the directory to the folder location. So when you have your thumb drive open, you get your file extension name, like up here. You can just highlight it, right-click, copy, and you go to that command window. And the command to change directories in DOS is CD, change directory, space. And if you go up to this little point up here and you right-click, you can go down to Edit Paste. And it'll paste that command line. And when you hit Enter, it should change it. But it left it at C, not D. Ugh. Oh, it doesn't want to go to D. Okay, we might have to drag everything onto your hard drive to create them, but we'll get it worked out. Basically, what you need to do is direct DOS into that location. Then there's into that file folder. Then you're going to type an command for making the light position file. That's that LP bat file. You type LP create, all lowercase, no spaces. Then you add a space. Put in the starting number of your images. So if your image starts with number 599, you're going to be LP create space 599, then the name of the light position file you want, so quarter, like I put in quarter. Hit enter. You'll see a string of text go through the DOS window, and then a light position file named quarter, so it'll be quarter.lp should show up in that file folder. At that point, type go, enter. That activates the bat file that starts creating the PTM file using the fitter program. You'll see a line come up, and you just see a number of a sequence of numbers that's just going to start running. And what that's doing is that is each row of the pixels in the photograph that it's calculating through. And it's going to take a couple of minutes, probably 3 to 4 minutes to run through all those calculations. And you'll see it'll pop up, it'll say writing PTM to file. And then you should have a PTM file pop up in the folder that you've directed it to. And then the command line will come back up. At that point, you can go ahead and close out the command line. The PTM file should be in that file folder that you directed it to, and you can open it. Like I said, we'll go through that stuff. If it doesn't want to direct to the thumb drive, we can just drag that whole folder onto the desktop and run it from there. That's pretty much it. Everybody looks scared.
Big lunch? Okay, so what we'll start off with is going over into the lab and creating the file. First, we'll introduce you to the 2 PTM devices, show you the difference between the dome and the portable unit, and then ready to go. You guys can just jump right in and create them. We have a couple of things like some plaster casts and what? I noticed the one in blood.
Yeah, we got
diffused?
It may have gotten. There's several. We've got 4 footwear impressions in blood, just on white 8x10 paper, and a cast. You know, a dental stone cast of a shoe impression. So you can take your pick. We've got we took like 5 bloody impressions. So number 1 was the first step. 2, 3, 4, 5, and I just grabbed a couple of them. Some of them are kind of thin. They're like out there at the 4th and 5th step, and the others a little thicker. So you got your choice, and then just the cast. Or if there's anything else that you guys want to try, bring over, throw it under. Feel free.
Remember, there's 12 of you, so we kind of have to move it along because there's only 2 devices, 12. So about 6 on each one, and kind of move them. And then once you've got your files, come back in here and kind of work them on your laptop. And one of us will be in here at that point to help you along on creating the whole PTM file.
Yeah, so really, I don't think there's going to be time, and I know there isn't space on those thumb drives for you to do 1 on each dome. So kind of pick which dome, and hopefully we can get it even 6 and 6. That would kind of speed things up.
Or you want to pick numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go into the laboratory.
Yeah,